What is going on, everyone? Nico Lint here again, and today we're talking about things and tools and equipment that every boater should have, whether or not you're an experienced boater or you're new to boating. And I'm pretty much going to touch on everything from legally required safety gear all the way down to little tools and things that'll just make your experience as a boat owner simpler, better, and more efficient. Going to be a nice, short, sweet, and informative video, and one I think that you guys are really going to find useful, because a lot of these things are items that my family and I have found over decades of boat ownership to be really useful. So without further ado, let's hop on the boats and get into the video. And really quick, before we continue on further with this video, I do want to remind you guys to please subscribe to the channel if you like any of the stuff I post, boating, Bahamas, any of that sort of stuff. Liking the video helps as well, and then comment below what you guys want to see. I make these videos for you guys, and so if I know what y'all want to see, I can make more of those videos. Let's get back to the video. All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is your safety gear that you have to have on board to operate the boat. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one just because pretty much everyone already knows this stuff. I'm just going to briefly go through exactly what it entails. And so for this one, we're going to hop on the Albury here, and let me get everything out and I'll show you exactly what you need to have and give you the real quick rundown. All right, so first you need your life jackets, you need your throwable PFD, you need a fire extinguisher or multiple depending on what kind of fire extinguisher you have and what size boat you have. I'll put some information in the description about exactly what the requirements are there. You need your flare kit and a sound producing device. And on a smaller boat like this Albury, you can get away with a whistle. On bigger boats, you do need an air horn or some kind of horn because you need to be able to do extended blasts with it. I'm going to recommend, I don't care what size your boat is, get yourself an air horn. You can hear it way better than a whistle. It's, you're not losing a little tiny whistle, and it's just a better sound device, so get yourself an air horn. All right, so that is all the required safety gear that you have to have on the boats, but I do want to mention two more things for those of y'all who are going to be going offshore and into the ocean, and those two things are a life raft and a ditch bag, and more specifically, an E-perb. And so basically what an E-perb is if you set it off, it sends its location up to a satellite, which then sends it over to the Coast Guard or rescue authorities. And so should your boat go down in the ocean, you can set it off, and the Coast Guard and anyone coming to rescue you is going to know your exact location, which makes things a whole lot easier instead of them searching a several hundred square mile area trying to find a little human in the water, which has a pretty low success rate. So get yourself an E-perb if you're going offshore, and get yourself a life raft. It's gonna just make your boating experience a lot safer, and you're probably never gonna have to use it, but if you do have to use it, you're gonna be very thankful that you have both of those things. All right, so that's all the safety related stuff that you need on your boat. And so moving forward now into the things that you need just for the basic operation of your boat. The first thing I want to talk about is dock lines, and this one's pretty self-explanatory, but I want to kind of go through what we have found works for us in dock lines. And so you can see on the Albury up here, I have these color matched blue dock lines up here. I keep 6 of them in here, and that's my first thing. I'm going to recommend on no matter what boat it is, you keep at a minimum 6 dock lines. And so basically that's going to allow you to cover all your bases no matter what the docking scenario is. If you need to, you can have 2 bow lines, 2 stern lines, and 2 spring lines. And more often than not, you're not going to use all 6 of those lines, but you have the option to should you need to. And then on bigger boats like the Bahama, that travels quite a bit and is staying in different marinas and different places, I actually carry 12 lines at all times on that boat. And the reason being is, if I'm going to be staying over in a marina for 3 days, I can take one set of those dock lines, set them up on the dock for the tides, for the links are all correct. And then when I go out on a given day, I can just leave those dock lines on the dock. And then if I go stop for lunch or go to a bar or whatever else I'm going to do, I have a whole nother set on the boat to be able to use to tie up the boat there. And so having 2 complete sets for bigger traveling boats like that makes your life a whole lot easier, and I cannot recommend that enough. And something I do want to touch on is different size boats and different weights of boats need different size dock lines. And so just do a little bit of research there. If you go to West Marine to buy dock lines, on the side of the box, if you buy the dock lines there, it'll say you know, what diameter of line to get for what size boat. So just pay attention to that. And then I always do recommend, you know, going longer than you think you need on dock lines. You know, you can always manage excess line, but you can't make a line longer when you need it to be longer. So that's my little rant on dock lines. All right, so moving on from dock lines, the next, you know, item that you need for your basic operation of the boat is fenders. And the use of fenders is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, it protects your boat from rubbing up against anything that your boat might be tied up to. You know, if you're at the dock, you can put this between the pilings and your boat, so your rub rail is not getting torn up from the piling. You know, all of that force and load is just getting put on this blow up rubber fender that is made to take that abuse. You know, if you're tied up at a sandbar and rafted up with a couple other boats, you can put these between the boats and it'll keep the boats from hitting each other and damaging each other. And so fenders are an absolute must have on every boat. You know, you can see here we have blue color match to the boat. You can get these things in all different colors. So my recommendation is just to go ahead and color match them to the boat, make it look good. And you can see that we have 4. We have 2 down in that dirty compartment, and then the 2 that I took out for the sake of this video. And we always carry 4 because we do a lot of Bahamas sandbarring and rafting up and stuff. And so if I'm rafted up to a boat on both sides of me, I can have 2 fenders between the boat and my port side, and 2 between the boat, me and the boat on my starboard side. And so for our uses, we need 4. For a lot of people, 2 will suffice. But my recommendation on that front is basically to, you know, if you can hold 4 in your boat and you have space for 4 without taking up too much space from anything else, get 4. It'll make your life a lot easier. You know, if it's going to take up too much space, just get 2. You know, on the Albury, obviously that's a little 23-foot boat with very limited space. We just have 2 fenders because we don't have space for 4. If we did have 4, it would take up space from, you know, pretty much all the storage space on the boat. And so one more thing I do want to note with fenders is, you know, hanging your fenders up, which fenders are hung, you know, with these lines. We have, you know, these lines that we made up that go through the fender. And so we can always have a spot to tie them up. But normally on most boats, you know, you have to have a space to tie this line to hang a fender from. So it limits where you can put your fender, you know, to a spot where you have a cleat or a spot where you can tie it off to some metal work or something. And so what we have found to be the best solution for, you know, having a variety of spots to put your fenders are these. And these are from defender.com. And basically what these are is anywhere you have a rod holder, you know, you can set this in the rod holder, and then you can take your fender line and you can literally just put it through this hole, and then it comes out, whoops, and then it comes out the backside here, and you can just set it down into that jam cleat, and then boom, hang your fender over the side. And this is, and you tighten it up, and this is just going to keep your fender hanging there anywhere you have a cleat. And then again, because we do have lines coming from both sides of the fender, you know, I can use 2 of these things and, you know, put one here, and hang the fender between the 2. And so we have 4, you know, here's 2 more of these things, 4 of those. And so having 4 of them and these fenders with the lines already on them pretty much allows us to put the fenders anywhere down the side of the boat we possibly want. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Again, defender.com. They're not a sponsor. They don't even know I exist. I have just found them to be the simplest and best solution for hanging fenders. And they do make, you know, other companies make stainless ones with like a little cleat on top that you tie your line around, and those work great too. I have just found these ones to be better because you literally just pull the line through and it goes down through a jam cleat. There's no tying. It takes me 2 seconds to do it. And so there's my spiel on the fenders. All right, so moving on with the video, I want to talk about, you know, spare parts kits next. And everyone's spare parts kit is going to look a little bit different depending on what your mission. You know, if the only boating you're doing is cruising up and down the river, intercoastal to an island, you can get away with a whole lot less spare parts than, say, a boat like this that goes and spends months on end of the Bahamas, where parts availability is pretty much non-existent. And so at a minimum though, for any boaters, I'm always going to recommend a couple things to have in your spare parts kit, and most of those relate to the motors, because at the end of the day, things can go wrong on the boat and break, but as long as your motors work, you can always get home. If you lose your motors, you're kind of out of luck and can't exactly get home, and you're calling a friend or Towboat US or whatever it is. And so the biggest things on a motor, and the things that are most likely going to go wrong that the everyday person can fix, you're going to want to keep an extra, spare set of spark plugs on the boat. If you have one motor, obviously keep one spare set. If you have two, I still would only probably keep one spare set. If you have 3 motors or more, I personally like to carry 2 full sets. So for these V10s, that means 20 different spark plugs. And the same holds true for the coils, which basically ignite the spark plugs. Always have at least 1 full set on hand, because diagnosing which coil is bad on a motor is pretty hard. So it's a lot easier just to go through and replace all the coils. And they're not that expensive at the end of the day. Again, with these V10s, that's 20 coils, but these motors cost 200 grand all 4 of them installed, and so what is another $1,000 in coils? And the next one is propeller. It's very easy to hit something in the water, a log, a sandbar, something that's floating, and bust out the propeller. And without a propeller, your motor can work flawlessly, but you're not going to go anywhere without the propeller. And so always keep spare propellers on the boat, and they make spare prop holders. On this Bahama, we have 2 of them. I don't know if you're going to see it down in the bilge. You can see the stick over there, and there's one over there. And so right now we're actually trying to figure out our spare prop situation here. For one, there's a back order on the propellers for these V10 400 Mercs, so we're still waiting on our spares. We have them on order, but we're waiting on them still. But the propellers for these motors are significantly bigger than the propellers from the L6 Verados, and so we're not quite sure they're going to fit in these mounts down here. So what we're probably going to do with those is keep them in their boxes and keep them in the garage, and then when we go to the Bahamas, we'll just put them on the boat in their boxes and then put them on the garage in the Bahamas. Basically the thought process there is no matter where the boat is, we'll always have a spare set of props to have. And something to note about that is if you're on a if you have a single engine boat, obviously just keep one spare prop. But if you're on a multi-engine boat where some of your some of your propellers are spinning regular and some of them are spinning counter-rotating, have one of each. We have 4 motors, 2 are right-hand propellers, 2 are left-hand propellers. We keep 2 spare props, 1 left-hand and 1 right-hand, because you never know when one's going to go wrong. If it's a left-hand propeller and you only have a right-hand spare, that does you no good. And so prepare for every scenario. And so some other things that are not bad to keep spares of are pumps and float switches. We keep spare pumps over there in the garage, and I actually keep spare float switches here because in the Bahamas, I don't want to have to find out too late that my float switch isn't working and I open the bilge and it's completely full of water. So float switches are important. And so that's the spare parts kit. I'm going to kind of go through just briefly what we keep in ours here on the boat. And again, we just repowered, so we're still building it. But we keep oil filters, 2 oil filters, 4 fuel water separators. This is the hub kit for the propeller repair, and for those of y'all who don't know, the hub goes in the center of the propeller and it connects the propeller for the motor, and that basically is made to break away from the propeller should you hit anything, so it doesn't snap your drive shaft. The propeller just goes into free spin. We keep a couple belts. What else do we have? We have our spark plugs in here, and I actually only have 10 on here right now. I need to get a full another set to have a set for 2 motors. Again, we keep our spare float switches. We keep various nuts and bolts and Loctite. We keep a 30 amp to 20 amp converter, as well as a 30 amp to 50 amp converter. Because this boat goes to the Bahamas and is sometimes in docks that don't have great shore power, we like to be prepared for whatever the dock has available. And along with that, we also keep a spare 30 amp shore power cord and then a spare 20 amp shore power cord, which is basically your regular extension cord. And another thing we do keep as well is actually a spare set of clamps. You can see here, all the hoses and stuff on the motors, they're kept on with these little clamps, and we've had one fail before and it rendered a motor useless. And so ever since then, we keep spare clamps. But that's my brief overview on what to have in your spare parts kit. And one other thing that I forgot to mention, something that I remembered as I was putting everything back away in the boat here, when it comes to spare parts, always keep spare oil. Modern motors are pretty good about not burning or losing oil, but again, you never want to be caught in a situation where you're low on oil and so you can't run one of your motors, and oil is something that's pretty cheap and pretty easy to carry with you, so keep spare oil as well. Alright, so the next thing that I want to talk about is probably the single most useful tool you could have on your boat, period, and That is this thing right here, your good old cell phone. It's essentially an entire world's worth of information right there at your fingertips. If you have a question about where something is on your boat or something, how something works on the boat, you can just go on Google, boom, 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 and have an answer in 3 seconds. If you have a question about an area, you can again go on Google, look at the cruising forums, and find pretty much any information you need right there within the minute. There's nothing more powerful than having your phone on you while boating. But the two main things I want to highlight about having your phone, which I think are probably the two most useful things that your phone is good for on the boat, is one, navigation and navigation planning, and two, weather planning. And so first, let's talk about the navigation side of things. There are a bunch of navigation apps on the App Store that you can get, and they all really help enhance your boating experience by giving you some more information. But the one that I want to highlight here is an app called Ditch, because I truly believe it is the far and away best app for the majority of boaters out there. And the reason being is that not only does it show you charts, with depth shading and depth data and the Army Corps of Engineers data and all of that good stuff, it also takes in real-time information on basically vessels that have navigated through that area recently, and it records their AIS tracks, and so you can go on the app and see where other vessels have been going in that area, what water is safe to navigate. You can look at the app and say, okay, the chart says the channel should be here. I can see, okay, all of the other vessels' AIS tracks are showing, yes, that's accurate, and you can kind of stay in that same water where all those other vessels have gone before you. And so it's the only app out there that I know of that actively takes in new information and tracks other vessels and then will give that information to you to enhance your user experience. There's nothing else like it, and it truly is a game-changing app. And for those of you who have watched my How I Prepare for Bahamas Crossing video, which I'll link at the top of the screen right now, know my relationship with Ditch. In the past, they reached out to me and asked me to, test the product, tell us what you think, give us some feedback, the whole 9 yards, and I fell in love with it. I think it's truly, a unique product that offers a value that no other navigation app out there can. And so I reached out again and asked if they would also like to sponsor this video, and they said yes. So Ditch, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. I love your app, I love your product, and I hope other people see just how great it is. And so I'm going to go on the app right now and give you guys kind of just a brief little tour on exactly how it works. Alright, so we're going to jump into the app now, and I'm going to show you a little bit of how it works. And in the last video where I talked about Ditch, I did it on my iPad, and so in this one, I'm going to go ahead and do it on my phone because I think it's a little bit more useful. Realistically, when y'all are on the boat, you're probably going to have your phone right there with you and probably not going to have an iPad right there with you. And so when you open up the app on your phone, these are the charts that you're going to see, and you don't see me on the screen anywhere because I'm actually filming this away from the boat. But you can see the charts. They're very simple and well laid out charts that are easy to read, and it gives you all the information that you need and that you'd expect in a marine navigation chart. It shows you all of where your channel markers are. It shows you where the depths are. You can see where it lists the depth soundings. It shows you the depth shading. The lighter the blue, the deeper the water, the darker the shallower. It labels major waypoints and areas. If you zoom in here, you can see Telemar Bay Marina, which is a big marina here in Melbourne. And so it has great charts, and it shows you the information you'd expect, marine charts to show you, that other navigation apps are going to show you as well. But like I said, what sets this one apart is the fact that it takes in information from other vessels' AIS tracks, and it combines that with the charts. And so if you zoom in here, you can see the gray and the blue dots everywhere, and you can see under this green line, which I'll talk about in a second, there's a ton of dots. And so those dots are actually, points where other vessels have traveled, that have AIS. And so this app is recording all of that and then overlaying the information on the chart so you can see. So you can open the chart up and look, and like right here, and say, okay, a lot of vessels were navigating in this general area right here. That's probably pretty safe and deep water to go in. And you can look at it and compare it to what the chart says. Okay, the chart says it's 10 feet deep. Yeah, I can probably go mess around there, and I'm not going to hit bottom or anything. And so super, super cool. And so what you can also do too, if you just want to see the local vessels, is you can go to your map layers right here and you can turn off non-local vessels, and all of those gray dots go away and it only shows you the blue dots. And so the blue dots are what this app's AI algorithms determines are local vessels. It knows if there's a boat that is constantly navigating in a certain area. It can tell, yes, that boat probably knows those waters very well because it's there every single day or every single week, and it's going to label it a local vessel. So you can go and look at that information and say, okay, all these AIS tracks are from boats that clearly knew this water really well. I'm going to follow those and I'm going to stay safe. And so that's what sets the app apart, and it's super, super cool. And so you can see that green line there, and what that line is actually marking is the intercoastal, which is actually where this app gets its name from. The intercoastal is known as the ditch, hence the name ditch. And so the way that this app makes, that line of where the intercoastal is, where, when you're navigating, stay in that line and you're going to be safe, is that not only takes in charting data, which any app can do, it also makes that route based off of the AIS data that it compiles. And so that route is going to be more accurate of a intercoastal path than what any other app can give you, because it's real time. This is the path that boats are taking. It's pretty impressive. And so using it to plan a trip is extremely easy. So say I want to go, from where the boat's kept at the Eau Gallie Yacht Club, down to the Sebastian Inlet. I can go over here near the Eau Gallie Yacht Club, click and hit, I want to route from here. Then I'm going to scroll all the way down here to the Sebastian Inlet. And so I'm going to go right here where the Sebastian Inlet channel starts. I'm going to click. And then the app's AI algorithms, what it's going to do is it's going to compile all of the charting information and then also all of the AIS information that it has compiled from, the start point to the end point. And it's going to give me a smart path. And that smart path is this orange line. And so basically I can be on my boat, have my boat's GPS open, have my phone open to ditch literally directly next to it, and compare the two and say, okay, the boat's GPS says I should go here, but when I look at the ditch app, that orange line is a little bit more to my port side, and the ditch app knows most boats are going to be taking that route a little bit more to my port side. I better get to my port side. So it's a much smarter way to navigate. And it's got some other cool features too. Like once you do a route, it actually saves the route. So if you go on the bottom here and click My Routes, you can see the top two are from previous routes I've actually used the app for. But that bottom one on October 5th, that's the one from today. And so if I go back to the chart and I click on this orange line, I can hit Route Info. I can name the route. So because this is basically from where the boats go, is kept to Sebastian, I'll just put home to Seb. I can update route. Let me hide this route real quick. And so now in the future, say in a week, I want to go take that exact same route from where the boat's kept to Sebastian. I can just go down to My Routes, click on Home to Sebastian, and it's going to give me back that exact same route. So I don't have to go through and be clicking on waypoints every single time. And so extremely useful navigation app. There's nothing else like it on the market. It's the only one that takes in real information, real time, to give you the most up-to-date information and most accurate navigation information. It's really, really cool. I'm going to put a link to the app down in the description below. I highly recommend you guys go and download the app and check it out for yourselves. Don't take my word for it. I guarantee if you go try it and like it, you're going to end up using it quite often. So thank you again, Ditch, for sponsoring this video. Let's now get into the weather routing part of why your phone is so powerful. All right, and so moving on to weather planning, I think this is probably the most important thing that your phone is useful for, because you don't want to get caught in storms. You don't want to go out there and get caught in massive waves that make things dangerous. You want to be able to see what way the wind is coming from, to know what way the waves are coming from, and so on and so forth. And there's a ton of apps on the App Store that can give you all of this information. My personal favorite is app called Predict Wind. Not sponsoring me. They don't know I exist. Just I use their app and I like their app a lot. And so I'm going to give you guys a brief rundown on how I use the app to figure out, exactly what I'm going to do, how I plan for my weather. And so when I open up the Predict Wind app, it's going to open up to this weather chart basically. And so you can see right now it's set to between Miami and Freeport. I'm in Melbourne right now, and so I have the Melbourne location saved, so I can hit here, Melbourne, and it's going to give me the Melbourne forecast. And so I know a lot of people really like looking at the visual representations of the wind and everything. So if you go here and hit Maps, you can see I had wind map selected. And so if I zoom out, it's going to give you that visual representation of where the wind's going. And so by looking at the little dots with the tail, you can see what direction the wind is coming out of. You know, judging by the color shading, you can tell how strong the wind's going to be. You know, the legend is down at the bottom. You know, purple is next to no wind. You know, blue is 5 knots of wind, green is 10 knots of wind, yellow is 15 knots of wind, and so on. You can read that on the screen. And then there is a little slider down at the bottom, so you can slide and see what the forecast is going to be in the future. And so, you know, I'm filming this on Saturday, October 5th. And so as of y'all know, there is that hurricane forming off the coast of Mexico, looking like it's going to come straight through Tampa. So like I can see on this map, if I scroll to the future, I can see exactly where it's predicted to go through and the wind and all that good stuff. And so this is currently showing me the GFS model. If I click down up at the top here where it says GFS, I can change it to whatever model I want to see. I only ever really use the GFS or European models. I think they're the best. I just like them the best. I don't know why I think that. I just do. And then if you do click on a singular point on the map, you know, I can click off of Melbourne right here. It's going to give me the information for the weather at that point, at whatever time I have set on the slider down below. And so I don't like really looking at the weather maps like this. I'm more of a numbers kind of math person. So what I do is I go back and I go to the tables. And so I look at these tables, and let me zoom out on the table a little bit. There we go. And so now I can see the weather in the future. So if I want to go fishing, you know, this coming Monday, I can scroll over to Monday, and it's going to give me the weather forecast at every hour on Monday. So if I'm going to leave the dock at 7 a.m., I can go to 7 a.m., go down, and these top numbers are giving me wind speed. Again, I only really care about the GFS and European model. So I can see at 7 a.m., the European model is telling me there's going to be 14 knots of wind, while the GFS is telling me there's going to be 7 knots of wind. Okay, what direction is it coming from? If you look just below that, you know, it's coming out of the east. And then lastly, okay, what's the ocean looking like? So if, you know, I go even more down, Monday the 7th, go down to this area here where it says wave height. I can see Monday at the 7th. I just zoomed in. You know, that was what happened just there. I can see the wave forecast is, you know, 5.2 feet out of the east at 10 seconds. So not exactly going to be a pleasant day offshore. A 5-foot wave is not pleasant. 10 seconds is not that bad, but 5 foot is still not that bad. And so that's how I use this app. Realistically, what I care about in the app is wind speed, wind direction, wave speed, wave direction, and wave period. And this gives it all to me right here in a super concise, easy to read thing. And it gives it up to me about, you know, 10 days out. I'd say accurately 5 to 7 days out, which is as accurate as any wave of weather forecast is going to give it to you. And for those of y'all who just want to see it quick at a glance, they do have the option too. If you go back here and you click on daily briefing, it's just going to give it to you for parts of the day. Like you can see, this is Saturday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. It gives you all this information. I can scroll over and see, you know, Saturday from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. But again, I want to go fishing on Monday morning. So on the bottom here, I'm going to hit Monday, you know, 5 a.m. And so this is the early forecast from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Monday. You can see it's going to be an east wind at 6 to 14 knots. With waves coming out of the east, 5.2 feet at 10-second period. And so it gives me all the information like this. It's super, super, super easy to read. Again, predict when, you know, I would love for them to sponsor me, but they don't know I exist. I love the product, and I think it's probably, you know, I found it to be the best and most accurate weather planning app. So if you guys are looking for one, you know, Predict Wind is one I would recommend. But that's how I use my iPhone for weather planning. You know, it's an extremely powerful tool. Whether you use Predict Wind or any other weather app, having this kind of weather information at your fingertips whenever you need it it's next level. And it's something that if you would have told, you know, boat people 30 years ago they would have said, you know, oh my God, that's impossible and it's ridiculous and it's the luckiest thing in the world. And so we're super blessed. These phones provide quite a bit of value to us on a boat. And so that's why I think the boat is probably the single most powerful tool you can have with you on the boat. And so let's go on to the next section. All right, so moving on from the phone and the apps that, you know, will help make your life easier. Again, huge thank you to Ditch for sponsoring this video. I want to move into some more supporting stuff on boats. And so a lot of this stuff is going to be related to cleaning a boat. I'm not going to go into the actual cleaning supplies, you know, waxes, soap, that's all particular. But little things that you should have on the boat that make both, you know, boat operation and also cleaning easier. The first of which being a boat pole. You know, we keep a bunch of these on hand. We have one there, we have two there. Every boat has one on it. You know, these are Surehold, which I think Surehold makes some of the best cleaning products, you know, in the industry. But basically, they're just long telescoping poles, so you can make them even longer, that you can put a variety of attachments on the end. Here we have a brush on one and a boat hook on the other. You should have both, because, you know, when you're out and about and docking, this boat hook can be indispensable for grabbing a line that's on a piling that's out of your arm's reach. If you need to hand a line off to someone on the dock, you know, you hook it to the end of it and give it to them. These things have a couple notches at the top here to fit different size lines and everything else. Just, you never know when you're going to need a boat hook. I highly recommend doing that. And then obviously the brush, that's self-explanatory. You know, it helps you clean. You know, a big long pole like that allows you not to be on your hands and your knees scrubbing with your hands. You're going to stand up and use the brush. You know, they make a bunch of different brushes. I'm not getting into that in this video, but get a boat pole. It makes your cleaning experience easier, but also makes your boat operation a whole lot easier. All right, so this next one that I'm going to recommend is going to be a controversial one, not because of the product, but because of the brand I'm going to recommend. But you can never have enough buckets on a boat. You know, this is our boat garage. Please, you know, excuse the mess, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buckets just sitting around this garage. And then every boat behind the house, which is 3, the Reef Runner, the Albury, and the Bahama, has another bucket on it. They have a whole slew of uses for bait, cleaning, moving stuff around the boat, scooping water, whatever you need to do. And when it comes to buckets, here's the controversial part. I actually highly recommend the Yeti bucket. Not being paid to say this, Yeti doesn't know I exist, but the Yeti bucket is, in my opinion, one of their products I think is well worth the money. And I say that for a variety of reasons. The first of which being the weight. You know, these buckets are a little bit heavier, and they're actually heavy enough to where the bucket can be sitting on the deck. You can be going full throttle on the boat, and it's heavy enough that it's just going to sit there. It's not going to fly out. I have lost many buckets that have been empty sitting on the deck and flown out. And along with that, it does have rubber feet on the bottom, so it's going to stay where you put it. It's not going to slide around the deck. It's not going to scratch up your gel coat. So that combined with the weight makes it easy. And third, it's a really, really well-built bucket. You know, buckets break. The cheap buckets break all the time, you know. This is a cheap one we got from Bahama Boat Works. You know, it got brittle and broke here, and so we lost the strap over top of it. I've never had a Yeti bucket break. They're really well built. And so, yes, they're $40 when you can get other buckets for $3, but it's going to last you forever. And then second little side note on it is they're double walls, so there is a little bit of insulation in those buckets. And so if you are carrying ice around, which us in the fishing world do quite often, you know, it is nice to have that little bit of insulation where it'll keep ice for a little bit. And so I know it's $40. I know it's an expensive bucket. I truly believe that's one of the Yeti products well worth the money. And at the end of the day, these boats aren't cheap. You know, today, if you want to go build, you know, a new 32-foot boat, you're paying $300,000 to $400,000 anyways. You know, an extra $40 to have the right tool for the job on the boat is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. You know, I highly recommend the Yeti bucket. All right, so this next item I'm going to talk about is the one that I think you guys are probably going to scoff at me for even recommending, and that's due to the sheer price of this unit. But if your budget allows, getting a water purifier, one of these bad boys, is going to be an absolute game changer for you. And so, you know, basically it purifies water through reverse osmosis. So you take your dock water, you run it through this thing, through a series of filters and membranes, and it spits out ultra clean and ultra pure water. You know, our dock water here at the dock, I think, is like 350 parts per million. And after this thing is done purifying, I think it gets it down to like 8 parts per million last time I checked. So extremely clean water, so you can spray off your boat, let it air dry, and you won't have any water spots on the boat whatsoever. You know, these boats are expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars for center consoles these days. And so you want to maintain them with the absolute top quality stuff you can, and that includes your water. And so a water purifier like this is, going to give you that water and give you the best experience possible for maintaining your boat. And I mentioned the price. The reason y'all are going to scoff at me is like this one. This is a Spot Zero Mobile Pro Mini, which I believe is the smallest one Spot Zero makes. And this was still $5,000. So not cheap in the slightest. So if one of these things is not in your budget, I would at a minimum recommend getting a water softener. And so it's not going to purify your water like this. You know, you're still going to want to dry your boat when you're done and everything like that. but it is going to provide a lot cleaner water than the dock water coming out of the spigot. And so at a minimum, I would at least get a water softener. If the budget allows, get yourself a reverse osmosis purifier. Again, a lot of you guys are going to say, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that, which is true. You don't need it, but it will make your maintenance experience a whole lot better. You're not having to, dry as often. After I spray with this, I don't dry the boat at all, and I don't get any water spots on the boat. So that saves me a ton of time, because drying a 41-foot center console with a bunch of nooks and crannies and crevices is a very time-consuming endeavor. And so this thing saves me so much time. And on top of that, I fill up all of our freshwater tanks with this water, so it's ultra pure water. It's easier for the pumps and the hoses and everything, and everything involved with fresh water on the boat. So it's just a better water for your boat. So get one of these. If that's not in the budget, at least get a water softener. It'll make your life easier. All right, and real quick, when we're on this topic, I do want to highlight how we recently rigged up everything relating to boat water with these quick connects here. The company here is Gardena. Even when it comes to hose nozzles, you can just push it in and it connects. And so we've done that to every spigot on the dock, every fresh and raw water outlet on each boat with the Spot Zero. And basically it just saves us having to screw in hose nozzles and hoses every time. It's something small, but it's something that saved us a bunch of time, and it's really not expensive. We keep an entire box just full of various quick connect fittings at all times, just in case we need to replace them or add them to another boat or whatever it might be. Just something that's made our life a little bit easier. And then another thing I want to briefly talk about is these hose nozzles. You can see these are just the cheap plastic Gilmore hose nozzles. I think they cost like $3. But the reason for that is I see so many people going and getting these high quality metal hose nozzles, garden hose nozzles, and using those on the hose to clean the boat, which is fine and everything. But the issue there is that that's hard metal. If you're cleaning your boat and you drop the hose, or that metal drags along the gel coat and fiberglass, it's going to mark it up. It's going to damage your gel coat and fiberglass, and it's going to hurt the boat and possibly chip up the gel coat, which is the opposite of what you want when you're maintaining a boat. And this plastic, this is just a soft plastic, that's much softer than the fiberglass and gel coat. So I can drop that on the deck all day long, and it never once is going to knock up or damage any of my gel coat. So get the cheap nozzles. I think these are like $3, so you can buy 10 of them at a time, and that way when one breaks, you just put the next one on and you're good to go. So that's just a little hack, I guess, that I figured out over the years. All right, so back on the Albury to talk about another thing that I have found extremely useful that every single boat on this dock, the Bahama, this Albury, and that Reef Runner have, is this dry decking material in every single compartment. And basically what these are like squares that you can put together and cut to fit in various compartments. And basically what it does is it elevates everything you have in a compartment up above the ground and lets any water to fall through these holes. That way none of your stuff is sitting, in water, and it keeps everything dry. And so we have it under the helm here, moving forward into this helm seat here. You can see we have it down there. Moving into this seat, you can see we have it on the bottom of this forward compartment. And then even up in the anchor locker, you can see we have it down there. And another benefit it does have, and something like the anchor locker, is it's a protective layer between that anchor and the fiberglass in there, so it's not, scratching up the fiberglass. So any type of dry deck material like that, I highly recommend putting in pretty much every compartment on your boat that you plan on holding anything. I just hopped inside the house here to grab the boat keys real quick, and something I see overlooked, which I'm going to take 5 seconds real quick to mention, is on your boat keys, put a float. These boats float in the water, and the last thing you want is losing your boat keys overboard and sinking. So just put a cheap $1 float, and it solves that entire issue. And one last thing that I'm going to briefly touch on before I go ahead and end this video is having some sort of knife on board your boat. We keep some sort of knife on every single one of our boats, whether it be, a bunch of fillet knives like we have here in the Bahama, or just a little cheap pocket knife that we keep on the Albury. But the reason for that is you never know when you're going to need a knife. One reason being boats, there's all kinds of lines and ropes involved with a boat. And you never know when you're going to have to need to cut one of those lines. Maybe you're anchored and your anchor is stuck and you have to get out of there in a heartbeat and just cut the anchor line, or it be a dock line, or Whatever the case may be, a knife is something that is just good to have around. You're always going to find some need for a knife at some point. You know, on this boat, you know, we keep all kinds of knives. We have a couple of fillet knives. We have 2 paring knives. You know, we always have enough knives, but go buy yourself a cheap $10 pocket knife and keep it in the console of your boat, and then, you know, every year when it rusts out, just replace it with another one. Or, of course, buy a higher quality one that's going to last, but have some sort of knife. You never know when you're going to need it. Alright, so that's just a brief overview of a couple of little things that we have found kind of make the boat ownership and boating experience a little bit simpler, a little bit easier, and a little bit more enjoyable for us, and so I think they're going to help you guys. And so if you guys have anything to add to the video, you know, please leave it down below in the comments. I want this video to be as useful for as many people as possible, and so the more y'all contribute, the more useful it is. But that's about it for this video. So again, if you guys like anything related to boats in the Bahamas and anything like that, please subscribe to the video. Liking this video helps as well. Comment below what you guys want to see more of on this channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one.